Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Engadget podcast for the week of June 10th. My name is Tim Stevens. I'm the editor-in-chief of Engadget. Joining me as ever, Mr. Brian Heater and Mr. Peter Rojas. Gentlemen, how are we this week?
You're looking
good, yeah.
You're looking business casual today.
Well,
casual Friday.
Casual
We
Friday.
don't see him usually on a Friday.
We're doing a special
podcast.
edition Friday podcast,
Yeah.
so if you're joining us live, welcome. We decided to push it back a little bit so that we could get the whole weekend news all in 1 hour long.
Because Thursday was
podcast.
such an exciting day for news.
There was a lot of people flying from one coast to the other.
That is true.
Some of us have
Well, not
battle
me.
scars from it.
Some of us just have mental scars from so much travel. We should probably just dive right in because skip the small talk because we got a lot to talk about.
Yeah.
Starting with WWDC because
Well, that was the first thing that happened this week.
the Microsoft thing started 30
Was
minutes
it the same
earlier.
time? It really? I
It
thought
was,
30 minutes
it was
earlier.
sandwiched between
Oh, I guess you're
Microsoft
right.
and Sony.
Yeah.
But
Right.
But Apple's
Alphabetically.
alphabetical. Yeah, we'll go
Well,
A
alphabetically.
little more in our wheelhouse, too. When it really
Well, no,
comes
so
down to it.
Microsoft, I mean, just had an event a few weeks ago, too. So
Sure.
it's not like they unveiled the Xbox
You had
One
your
this
time,
week.
Microsoft. Now it's Apple's time to shine with new iOS 7.
Yep.
Finally unveiled. We've been waiting for this for a while now, since Johnny Ive kind of took over the software side of things as well.
Yeah.
And apparently, it's a Technicolor future for the world of iOS.
It's a big. I mean, it's a really big overhaul for the operating system. At least visually, the biggest
Right.
one we've seen maybe since the beginning of the operating system.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, and I think that there was a sort of an overriding feeling that iOS had grown a little bit stale and needed to evolve, and it certainly was long overdue. So, I mean, there are some things that I really like about it, and some things that I didn't like about it. One of the things I didn't love was this use of that Helvetica. Was it the Noi ultralight
Super
font?
skinny fonts, yeah.
It's just a little. The weight just seems like a little too light for things. I mean, I don't like the way that Google uses it in some of its iOS apps. I feel like if you're reading a big block of text, it doesn't work very well. It's great for headers and things like that, but for bigger blocks of text, I find it a little hard to read, and it's not designed really for that.
Yeah, but what I do like, I think, about the overhaul here, though, is that, and I think they were very conscious of the fact that they had to keep things mostly the same. At least like in a very abstract point of view, you need the row of icons. I mean, you need everything kind of more or less in the same place, or else you're going to upset a lot of people.
Yeah, and there certainly
overall.
are no revolutionary changes to the operating system. It's very familiar. It does look
You are
much
aware that
nicer.
it moves when you move it, right?
Again, that's
That
been
seems a
done
little
elsewhere.
gimmicky.
It
It's
is.
more
totally
than-
gimmicky.
I mean, it's
like a
nice.
cereal box, yeah.
I mean, I think I understand that one of the. I mean, it's why when Microsoft introduced a capacitive touchscreen in the first place, it was such a big deal because it was something that felt more tactile, more responsive, like more in tune with your hand. And so I understand the idea that a device which sort of with the screen elements interact with the motion of your hand and things like that. I mean, I get it. Maybe it makes it feel a little bit more like it's in tune with your movement or the way that you're using it. But that in and of itself is pretty much. It doesn't make the phone easier to use.
No,
or-
and they didn't lead with it in such a way that this is this is the big change here. It's just
Right.
Here's a cool new visual element that we have.
In terms
Yeah.
of functionality, probably the biggest new change is the control center, which is when you swipe your thumb up from the bottom of the display, it brings up a contextual menu that lets you enable Wi-Fi, Bluetooth. You can go right into AirDrop, turn on the flashlight, bring up the calculator.
We've never seen that
The
before.
screen.
Yeah. So that's a new bezel gesture, which is, I think, a new thing.
I think it's probably the nicest addition there.
I think it is too. And multitasking has also seen a pretty big refresh. Now you double tap the home
And
button.
where have we
as
seen that
before,
multitasking
which
before?
looks a lot like WebOS. So you see cards,
Windows Phone?
and now you can scroll through the cards. You pick the card, and then the one you want. The difference, I guess, the big difference between WebOS is there's no side bezel gesture, which I was actually a little bit
It's
surprised.
nice though
about.
that something has finally come out of Apple's purchase of Palm, right? It's nice that they're finally getting some traction on
More
that.
factual information from Brian Heater about the Apple acquisition of Palm. I think it looks much nicer, and they talked about how they're finally enabling all apps to do full multitasking, which is I actually chuckled to myself when they mentioned that because it's kind of funny to think that here we are in 2013 and iOS is now getting full multitasking.
Well, and when they promise to do that without draining the battery life too much, there's supposed to be
Right.
some nice bumps there as well. Which
Right.
maybe I can get rid of this giant thing that I have on my phone.
No,
I'm sure the battery life's still going to be terrible.
Yeah, I'll probably still crack the hell out of this thing too if I drop it.
And look and feels a lot cleaner. I think, but Apple was very, very vicious in terms of their talking about the skeuomorphism that's been there before. The velvet surface on the Game Center and the calendar actually looking like a calendar. They killed all that stuff off, but they were very, very vicious about talking about how it was
It was like the
ugly
red
past.
wedding for skeuomorphism.
Yeah, I guess so. Man, they were not pulling any punches.
They've definitely made a point, I think, in the last couple of years, especially as Android has come to prominence to take quite a bit of time out of these keynotes to attack the competition, and they did that a lot with Android. And one of the points that and obviously this is something that you need to hammer home when you're Apple, is that you're making one operating system for one device, and that means that it works really well on that device.
And it looks like it will. We didn't see it on an iPad yet to broaden that a little bit, but presumably
It's
it'll
not
be
done yet. Sure. Yeah.
It'll be there for the fall.
There's just going to be two big black bars on either side for formatting.
Or the 2x zoom down in the
But they
lower
just
right.
seem oddly defensive during
They
the
did,
keynote,
definitely.
which I don't think they need to be.
No.
I mean, the sense I got from iOS 7 was that it looks like a lot. I mean, obviously it looks nice. I do think the elements of it look cluttered, or at least more cluttered than it maybe needs to. And I think that there will probably be some more refinement of the design between now and when it finally hits consumers. I'd be really surprised if there wasn't. But it felt a little bit more like this is designed to keep people who already use an iPhone from leaving for Android, rather than getting people who use Android to switch to leave Android for iPhone. Like, it feels like they're kind of not being defensive, but maybe that they're trying to make sure that their current user base is happy, rather than necessarily trying to like pull in more people.
It seems
Not that they're not always trying to find new customers.
Sure, but it seems like if they're going to go on that offensive and try to pull people over, it's going to be from a hardware perspective, right? I mean, that's where they're going to try to make those conversions.
And that's maybe why we'll see a larger phone with a larger screen.
Yeah.
Or maybe cheaper hardware. But I think that's
both.
Yeah, or both. It's funny. A friend of mine that I bumped into the other day was asking me what I thought about the new design, and he said that his way for describing it was that it was Metroid. It was Metro plus Android, kind of borrowing little element, because it does kind of do that. It borrows,
Sure.
And to be honest, I am totally fine with people stealing from each other, because I think that if something works in a mobile UI or UX, it's not surprising that those elements would show up in other places. I mean,
That said,
you see the same thing on the desktop.
That said, Apple should get a little more flack for doing it, since they're so aggressive.
I feel like they've got some flack.
No. I'm saying they
because
should
they're hypocritical
than
about
other people.
it. Because they go nuts when other people borrow from
absolutely.
them.
And so deservedly, people are calling them out on it.
Yeah.
And they have. So iOS 7 was part of the announcement for sure, and probably the most anticipated thing anyway. But there's also the new OS 10 Mavericks, which to me was a bit of a curious choice of name, because they're talking about the location in California. They're not talking about either the missile or the character in Top Gun or
John McCain.
The basketball
John McCain.
Yeah.
So they're not talking about being a Maverick, which is good, because the operating system is obviously not exactly being a
They
Maverick.
did have James Garner come out and present it, though, which I thought was a weird choice. No?
It's too expensive.
Yeah.
But it again looks like a reasonably predictable but nice step forward in terms of functionality. We've got tabbed Finder windows. We've got better CPU performance, but presumably, and also better battery life supposedly. But again, we got to wait and see how those things work in the real world.
Here's the thing, right? Everybody's saying.
Brian?
Here's the thing. The thing is, everybody's saying, iOS is too stale. This operating system that we've had for 4 years now.
No, iOS
7,
6
right?
years.
Six years now, but versus OS 10,
10
which
years.
has been around for a lot longer,
A decade.
and and they made a huge visual refresh to iOS, but not to OS 10. It's the same thing, and it sounds like they're just going to continue to just make these iterative updates for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, which was a bit of a surprise to me. They talked about changing the naming scheme, moving away from cats, and they very clearly said, I think Craig Federighi said, that this is a new naming scheme that will carry them through the next 10 years, which seems to imply that they're not going to go to an OS 11 like I'd kind of hoped that they would, and do another major refresh of the
like
OS.
Spinal Tap OS.
Yeah, no, they're going to just keep with the same drummer for the next 10 years.
Do they have a strong incentive to make the huge investment in a next generation desktop operating system? I mean, just being realistic about, if you think about laptop and obviously desktop sales being pretty flat for them, which they have been, and for everybody for the most part, does it make sense to spend? I mean, it's a big investment to do an entirely new OS, and to do something that would be different enough and useful enough to justify it.
And
Yeah.
to keep people on board and not freak people too much
Yeah.
out when you do a total refresh.
To break backwards compatibility and all of. I mean,
Yeah, and let's be honest. I mean, Microsoft's not bringing anybody over from Apple at this point. They're not converting a lot of people the other way around.
Yeah.
And it seemed
I did read a really interesting
Yeah.
thing last night by someone who's a big photo editor, and he made the switch because he just got tired of waiting
Okay.
for.
So
I
that
mean,
guy-
it does happen, but it's like
it's rare.
I think that people have settled in. I think that I think that market is pretty stable, and I think that it is plateaued. And I don't
Sure.
think and any growth and change and innovation is mainly going to happen in the mobile side now, which is as you'd expect.
Yeah, and lessons learned from Microsoft that you don't want to radically change it. But that said, I think that they can still do a nice overhaul without radically changing it. And they showed us that they can do that on iOS 7. But part of the problem here is it seems like most of the developers from iOS 10 from OS 10 have gone over to iOS 7. So it's just that there aren't that many people, improving the software at this point.
Yeah.
Is this enough of an upgrade to warrant a presumably $29 upgrade price?
Well, it's early yet. I mean, they're definitely going to roll out more features. I don't think there's any question about that. And sure, I mean, I think I think people are going to keep upgrading every year. It's $30. That's not
it's
a
not
huge
that much to
commitment.
spend.
It's going to keep you updated from a security standpoint and all those other things. So yeah, I mean, why not do it? That said, it's about time. It's about time for something new.
I think it's about time myself. I'm definitely excited to see what the battery life improvements could possibly be. They talked about basically taking the CPU spikes and kind of merging them together to create a better utilized CPU between, high utilization and low utilization, whether or not that, I don't know, it seems like that should have been done a while ago. It's hard to believe that 10 years on they
there's
can
a lot
really
of
make a major
tweaks.
improvement.
The ability to use it on multiple monitors, which I think was something that was kind of crippled with the release of Lion, right?
Which was another
So
thing
there-
where I was sitting there shaking my head like, okay, we're finally getting proper multi-monitor
Yeah.
support in OS 10. So now you'll be able to have your dock in multiple windows. You can have your menu bars in multiple windows. I mean, that's basic stuff.
Maybe not the stuff to lead with, but certainly important stuff when you're addressing a room full of developers.
Sure, definitely a good thing. It was just surprising to me that, that's even a talking point, I guess. It's something that I've come to expect on Windows. Although, to be fair, Windows 8 doesn't exactly do multi-monitor support.
Well, yeah, I mean,
perfectly
Apple's approach. This was their approach with Mountain Lion as well, was to do a lot of really small iterative updates, but try to overwhelm people with the sheer amount of updates that they could roll out. And certainly, I think they had said at one point in the keynote that they had more that they just didn't have time for because they didn't want a 10-hour.
And they threw up the slide
Google.
with all the features scattershot as they always do.
Yeah.
And we did have a very limited exposure to the operating system, and it's still a ways away. So
That
definitely,
said, they
we have a lot
wasted
more
10
to say.
minutes at the top of it with that card. And I thought it was a cool demo, but it's like, really? I mean, if you've got too much stuff to show us that you can't fit into, 2 hours, you're going to lead with that?
So they led with basically an intelligent, almost sort of augmented reality car driving game where you can, in theory, drive cars around a track that would be basically just like a poster or a carpet maybe on your floor, and you control them
Autonomously.
with your phone.
Well,
so
I mean,
the
they
cars
have
can drive
brains in them.
themselves,
Yeah.
but you could race against the autonomously driven cars, which I think seems kind of cool. But
Totally.
to me,
And it's a developer conference, so it's like,
Right.
here's a cool thing that
you could in theory do with Bluetooth.
And it was
LE
during
and all that good
E3,
stuff.
so here's a gaming thing
That's
that we
the thing.
have.
So this is Apple saying this is the future of gaming, effectively. Forget all those consoles and the stupid graphics and Intel processors and all that junk. This is the future of gaming, is real physical interactivity.
What if they had come out and shown off a Mario game?
That would have blown some people's
Boom.
minds.
Minds would have exploded.
Mhm.
That's next
Especially
year.
the people at Nintendo. I think their minds would have really blown up if that had happened.
Sorry, Nintendo, we didn't tell you guys.
we own Luigi now. Oh, you didn't know?
They could. Man, they could.
Yeah.
Boy, that would be amazing if...
Would be
We're
pretty
probably
cool.
not far
They
away
could
from...
just buy Nintendo.
Yeah.
If like
It's
Nintendo,
yeah.
Nintendo was like, oh yeah, so we're not doing a press conference this year. Why? Because we're in San Francisco.
Actually, it'd be kind of interesting if they did buy Nintendo and say, this is our gaming play.
super
right?
cool.
We're like,
It'd
not,
be great.
That would make me sad, but on the other hand, it's like a perfect marriage at this point.
Why would that make you sad?
Because it's like when Sega started making hardware and then Nintendo gets bought
Yeah,
by
but
Apple. Come on.
at least Sega was making some interesting stuff there towards the end. I mean,
It would make me sad. As a gamer,
Yeah.
it would make me sad. But ultimately, I think that's probably what needs to
a
happen.
lot
with
of people are
Nintendo.
probably sad when Nintendo stopped making playing cards too, Tim.
You know what, Brian?
But you know what? The world's a better place.
It's true. I was going to say something crueler than that, but we'll leave it at that. Apple also showed off their eagerly anticipated streaming service, which isn't exactly what we were expecting anyway. It is basically more like Pandora than Spotify, for sure.
Which I think
we
is what we were
expected
expecting.
Pandora,
yeah.
didn't we?
Yeah.
But I expected some sort of a premium service. Which
The
this
premium
is
services
not,
that you can get it without
really.
ads.
I suppose I was expecting something more like Spotify, where you could not only listen to radio stations but create custom playlists and download tracks, listen to albums.
Yeah,
It sounds like
the labels don't want to give them that.
That was what
Yeah,
I was
exactly.
expecting.
They weren't really able to clear it, and B, like what's in it that for them at this point.
Right.
This is they've essentially right now what they have in this service is a way to get people to buy stuff through iTunes.
Yeah, it's definitely a very big marketing ploy for iTunes, because everywhere throughout the interface there's always a buy link. Anytime you listen to a track, there's a buy link.
Which
When
you're
make
gonna,
a radio
you're gonna
station,
get
there's a
through
buy link.
Pandora. You're gonna
Sure.
get through all these other services. So why not, if you're Apple, make your own and just sell it to people directly?
Versus cannibalizing all your sales.
Yeah.
It definitely makes sense. It's just not quite what I was hoping for anyway. It's certainly not anything that Spotify needs to worry about, but Pandora obviously, I think
Pandora
does.
should be, obviously, anytime they have a major competitor in the streaming radio business, they have to worry. But especially because their costs are, Apple can afford to lose money on this, or at least to lose money on the royalties and make it up through sales.
Sure.
Because they get a bigger cut of the sales.
Yeah.
Pandora, whatever cut they might get of a transaction on iTunes or any place else, is going to be so much smaller that they can't really afford to lose money on the royalties.
I've got to wonder if anybody is making money from streaming services.
I don't think so.
Spotify doing well
Spotify's
at
not
all?
making money at all.
Yeah, so
Spotify's it's like they lose money on every stream, they make it up
Yeah.
on volume. Basically.
yeah, and it's from the sound of it, Apple hadn't quite cleared. I mean, we'll see what's actually available through this service right now, but it sounded like they were pretty much down to the finish line when it came to talking to all these labels. So, I mean, Zeppelin, that's a pretty good get.
Yeah.
Zeppelin was right there with Beatles as far as not wanting their music to be on these services. I think they didn't
the thing is,
want
if
their
you want to
stuff
do a
cut
radio
out.
service, you don't need to get deals with the labels to do streaming radio. You need to do deals with the radios, the labels, if you want to pay less than the compulsory rate, which then makes the business viable. And that's what what Pandora does is they cut deals directly with the publishers and with the labels, so to pay a lower statutory rate than what is the compulsory rate set by the Copyright Office, and then they tend to play more of those songs than they do from everybody else.
I mean, from the sound of it, though, Apple was going around and trying to get people on
Yeah,
board
no,
with it.
'cause
and
then
I
you can-
suspect that that's going to be the case as well, that you won't hear as many songs from the competition.
Yeah.
And we did get some hardware. Not exactly the volume of hardware we were hoping for, but we got some
two
interesting looking things. First of all would be this, which is the new MacBook Air, which, if that's a
What a
surprise.
beautiful refresh.
It looks
No,
exactly like the old MacBook Air. There's one hardware difference, external. I'm going to move my bottle of water out of the way because otherwise I will spill it all over the desk. There is now a second hole on the side. Look real close, viewers. You can probably not see that at all. There is a second microphone input on the side for noise cancellation.
Cancellation.
Easy for me to say. I did back-to-back audio tests with the old and the new recording audio. I didn't notice any difference, but perhaps someone with better ears than I will tell. The big story for here is, in my opinion, the battery life. We got 12 hours and 51 minutes on our battery rundown test. The last MacBook Air did 6.5 hours.
That's
roughly.
12.
That's
Apple,
actually even better than what you would expect from Haswell.
Yeah,
and
it's unbelievable.
Apple, I think is maybe the one company that kind of undersells battery life, right?
Yeah.
They're saying 12 hours.
They're saying 10 hours of video playback, 12 hours of web surfing. So in theory, it should have only done 10, but it did 13.
Yeah.
And I looked at a couple of the other
It's a
reviews,
Hanukkah
and they were
miracle.
all up around that level too. And in fact, so I was going to make a big deal about not charging this today and using it all day long. I actually forgot to charge it last night. So I started the day at 50%, and I've been using this for 6 hours now. It's still at 13%. And it's still got a couple hours to go. So very impressive battery life for sure. I'm curious, of course, to see what the 13 Pro can do and the 15 Pro, which we were expecting and didn't see.
Yeah.
Other improvements, there's a PCIe SSD in here now. I'm seeing about 30% improvement in reads and writes, which is also quite nice.
and they brand new Retina display.
No.
All right.
No
Joe,
Retina
I just told
display.
Joe.
If you stand far enough back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Squint enough.
No Retina display, which is definitely a disappointment.
It is going to be hard for them to get a Retina display in there and not murder the battery life.
But it seems like, I mean, I'm guessing that somebody had to make the decision, do we put a Retina display in and maintain the current level of battery life, or do we offer this amazing new improvement in battery life, almost doubling the battery life, and stick with the current SD option? I mean, it would have been great if they'd given the people the option of choosing between them, but of course this is Apple, so they're going to decide for you.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that they still can make the argument that the Retina displays are really for their Pro line, and that the MacBook Air is more of it's more their regular Ultrabook type competitor, and that the emphasis should be on being light, being the most portable, and getting the best battery life.
And they did lower the cost by $100 for this, but they also lowered the lowest spec CPU speed too, so it actually benchmarks a little bit slower than last year's, about 5 or 10%, because it's a 1.3 gigahertz chip versus I think it was a 1.7 or 1.8 last year. So it's pretty close, but it's not as fast. Integrated graphics aren't actually properly integrated now, which also I think will save some battery life. And there is like a 5% increase in battery size too, I think, making up for that decrease in circuitry size. So definitely a nice upgrade. Not exactly everything that we'd hoped for. I was really hoping to see a new 13-inch Pro. There was a lot of talk about a thinner 13 Pro, which I think would have been fantastic. Maybe later in the summer.
I'm not going to upgrade. I mean, at least not to the new. I'm definitely in the market for something for a new laptop, but given the MacBook Air I already have, it just doesn't feel like worth the leap.
Yeah, and it's disappointing to me that I'm definitely ready for a new laptop too, and I was going to wait and see how the 13 compared to the Air and make my decision, because I have the Air now and I like it a lot, but I wouldn't mind more performance if I can get good battery life. But now I have to kind of sit and wait for them to unveil the new Retina Pros, which presumably won't be far off.
It's always the way with Apple notebooks. They're not quite exactly what you want. They're always like a spec or two away from your perfect laptop.
Yeah. Always got to give you a reason to upgrade next year. And then the final major piece of hardware, there's also a new AirPorts and a couple other things. But the final major piece of hardware would be the new Mac Pro, which we definitely were expecting a new Mac Pro. And Tim Cook was also kind of teasing that they'd be making something in the US. And I was definitely expecting it would be the Mac Pro. And indeed it will be. But we weren't expecting anything like this, I think it's safe to say. The old Mac Pro looked like a PC pretty much. A very nice PC, but it looked like a PC. This one looks like a cylinder.
It's like Darth Vader.
If Darth Vader were a cylinder, it would look like this. It looks a little bit like the alien in Star Trek 4, maybe.
Did you notice those pictures that we got of the inside? Like, it looks like Darth Vader's mask.
I didn't notice that.
I didn't want to say anything to Apple. I thought they might be offended if I compared it to the Death Star.
But it's a beautiful looking machine.
Yeah.
It's got a cylindrical exterior that's made of aluminum, of course. It's black anodized, but it's a gloss anodization, not the matte that you see in the MacBook Pros. Zillion ports, 6 new Thunderbolt 2.0 ports.
It's true it's not black, it's more of a gray.
It's like what do you call it? Space gray
slate,
or
like
slate. It's
space
very
slate.
slightly...
So like a Death Star gray.
Sure. No, the Death Star is more of a gray. This is... I don't know what this is. Gunmetal. Joe says gunmetal. Or anthracite, I think, is probably a good term for it. Anthracite. Joe's giving me thumbs up. Anyway, it's black.
I actually kind of don't love the design.
Really?
It doesn't feel that Apple-ish to me. It feels, I don't know. It feels like kind of like industrial-ish in a way that like...
It feels less industrial than the old Mac Pro.
I don't know. I guess maybe there's something like that was kind of elegant about the old ones.
Yeah, the new one is. I mean, we've seen it in person. It actually is really, really nice in person. I don't think that really translates in the pictures.
It's abstract.
It's beautiful. Yeah.
It certainly doesn't look like.
And there's no disk drive.
No disk drive.
Yeah, that's to be expected.
Well, I know, but that was you'd expect at least for a little while.
And there's no room inside for any disks at all. So any upgrade that you make beyond the initial purchase will have to be external, which is why they've got the new Thunderbolt 2.0 ports, which I think are 20 gigabyte per second. It continues to have a handle on the top, and the whole thing rotates too, which is kind of nice. So if you're trying to find the ports in the back, the ports slide up too, which makes it easier to find. Really nice machine. Should be amazing performance for sure. So you mentioned the inside looks a little bit like Darth Vader's mask. It's because it's like a triangle shape, and what they did was they kind of backed all the circuitry up to each other, and then they put the heat sink in the middle, so the heat rises up through the center of the device, and
so you
pretty sweet.
Warm your hands when you're picking.
Yeah, actually, that's not a bad idea.
Nice on a cold day.
AMD FirePro GPUs. I mean, this is definitely a pro machine. This is not something that they're expecting people are going to plunk down on their desktop at home.
They didn't announce pricing because
no pricing.
I think it's going to be expensive.
Right.
It's going to be really expensive.
Yeah, I mean, 4K, something like that, probably rough guesstimate.
I will say the support for the Thunderbolt 2 supports the 4K out is really interesting to me, because I imagine that by the time they're ready to announce this, they'll have a 4K Pro display.
Yeah,
which will probably be like $2,000 or $3,000 just on its own.
Yep, there's definitely. I think you can have 3 4K monitors powered by this, which again helps with the new version of OS 10. You can have proper multi-monitor support, and presumably they'll have a Cinema 4K display ready when this launches, hopefully in black too, to match.
I'm sure it'll look exactly the same.
And of course,
It'll actually be a circular monitor.
It'll be a
like a porthole.
also look like a thermos.
and they'll need a new keyboard and mouse too, so they can have everything nice and black. So that was
Once you go black.
yeah, that was pretty much it from WWDC.
Yeah, fair. It's still a fair number.
Yeah,
of announcements
absolutely.
in a short period of time.
Absolutely. The vast majority of the stuff coming in the fall. Developers now have access to the new OS 10 and the new iOS 7. And so if you're a developer, have fun. But the rest of us will have to wait until probably September-ish, October-ish for this, hopefully maybe with a new phone to go along with. Maybe.
Yeah, definitely in time for people to buy really expensive laptops for the holidays, right?
Absolutely. All right, let's move a little further south to the Electronics Entertainment Expo, which was happening in Los Angeles. And Microsoft did kick off the show, and they announced the full details, well, almost full details of the Xbox One. $499 price, launching in November. We don't know exactly when November, but probably middle of the month. It's going to be launching in 21 countries. And again, $500. That includes the camera, and it's pretty pricey.
Yeah, it's
Wow.
you have to wonder if they knew what Sony's price was going to be going into it, like if they had gotten a leak on that. Cause
I always have conspiracy theories that like Sony going second has 2 presentations and they're ready to go.
Yeah,
They'll flip the switch.
yeah,
and
I mean,
if it's $399, then they'll go
it's
$499 or something.
It's one of
like
those
that.
things where, like, I don't think people would think $499 was crazy expensive unless Sony an hour later came out with a device that was $100 less.
Yeah, exactly.
Which
And,
is exactly what
what was the PS3 was $599, I think, when it launched.
It was,
and
yeah.
Then, and then the
It's-
Xbox 360 was $399.
And Sony's reaction was, "You should work more to be able to pay for it."
Yeah.
It's
It's funny the role reversal this
Yeah,
time
so we're
around.
starting to see that same sort of attitude from Microsoft because we got confirmation this week that indeed you will have to have your console connect online and basically phone home every 24 hours, or any games you've downloaded to your console will be deactivated. They will flip back on again as soon as you go back online. But if you're hoping to take it to a cabin for a weekend vacation, if you are in the Navy and you play games in the submarine, and I know actually quite a few sailors who do,
If you're in Canada,
use them
where there's
offline.
If you
internet.
vacation on a submarine.
Right. Or if you live in my house where I don't have regular internet access sometimes, that's definitely a big issue. And Microsoft's response from Don Metric was,
good.
well, we have a console for you. It's called the Xbox 360.
It's called Go to Hell.
That's what he might as well have said. I mean, Don is a nice guy. I'm sure he didn't mean it to sound that way, but ultimately it did sound that way. And it was
Yeah.
not, and it definitely did give me shades of the PS3 launch when Sony was basically saying, screw
and
you
they're going
guys.
to
We
correct
know
it.
what
I
we're
bet
going
you
to
will
do.
correct it. I bet you within the year. They're gonna do
If they
something.
if they have any sense, they will cave in on
Yeah.
all this
Oh,
stuff
absolutely.
because it's just it's not worth it right now. I mean, I think that obviously, I think Microsoft has a very strong interest in getting people to move away from disc-based games and towards downloads because they make more money. They make a larger cut of the transaction if you buy it from the Xbox store and download it directly to your console. But I think they should be taking more of a carrot than a stick approach. Right now, it's like you're punished basically for buying disc games in a sense by losing features which you expect to have because you've always had them. And I think what they should do is to try to make the download stuff more attractive to people and encourage people to do that if they want to bump up their revenue rather than taking away features from disc purchasers.
So they're taking a Windows 8 approach to getting rid of physical media then.
I mean, it's not even Windows. It's like if I turn my Android phone off and I turn it on again a month later and it's not been connected, it will still work. Every app on there will still work. Same thing for any downloaded game that I have now on my PlayStation Vita, my PlayStation 3.
Here's what I'll ask though. I'm wondering, just to play the devil's advocate, I'm wondering if there's a bit of a double standard. I mean, if Apple drops optical drives from all their systems, they're forward thinking. If Microsoft drops that support from this console, they're punishing people.
But it's not even that. Even if I buy a disc and I put that disc in my machine and I install that game, and then I take the disc out, which is a big thing that they're talking about, that you can play the game without having the disc in there. If I take that disc out, I still own that game. 24 hours later, if I haven't connected, I can't play that game.
I mean, it should be 30 days or something like that. I mean,
Yeah.
what they're worried about is people buying games or renting games and then putting them on their drive and then sending it right back or selling the game and not.
They're DRMing basically.
Yeah, and I understand that if that option, but like maybe make it the opposite. Like you can't make it so that the disc doesn't have to. You don't have to like you can't upload the game to the hard drive, but if you have the disc, you can always play it.
Do you think
which
that,
may be the case actually? We haven't confirmed that you can't play it with the disc in the system. That we don't know yet.
Yeah.
Do you think this was a restriction that they set, or do you think that this was something that the game developers essentially made them put in place in order to have?
It can't be the developers because they wouldn't be writing any games for the PlayStation 4. I mean, presumably it's a nice thing that the publishers, and again, I don't think the developers want it to be the publishers who would want it. And I'm guessing that the publishers are reasonably happy about this situation. But I mean, there's certainly plenty of developers and publishers still working for the PlayStation 4.
Yeah.
We did see more exclusives for the Xbox One, so maybe that's why. I mean, maybe they're making this a bit more publisher friendly in that regard. But again, we didn't really see that much piracy on the Xbox 360, which makes me wonder if maybe the Xbox One won't have the same level of security that the previous consoles we had. Maybe they can't do that because it's just basically a PC at this point. I mean, it's PC with customized hardware. But maybe they're afraid that this is going to be a much more easily hacked system than we've seen in the past, and this is their solution, which is a very heavy-handed way to do it.
Yeah. No, I mean, my sense is that this is just about them figuring out that they can eke out more revenue from people. And like I said, I think that they should not be so focused on that right now.
Yeah, they should be thinking gamer first. Everything should be gamer first, and this is obviously something that helps the publishers, helps them. There is, an advantage for us, which means again, you can put the disc in, you play the game, you can play the game instantly. It'll install in the background. You take the disc out, and you can forget about it. And that is nice because if you play the Xbox 360, you can install games, but you still need to get up off the couch and put the disc in if you want to change games, which I know sounds
which is
crazy.
kind of a nice thing. Getting up, walking 10 feet.
No,
sorry, 10.
No, definitely not. So you can do away with that now, which is nice. But I don't think that is enough of a benefit, like you said, Peter, to be leading with a carrot versus chasing you with a stick, which is what Microsoft's going to be doing. But we did see some nice launch to get away from that very negative thing. We did see some nice launch titles. Forza 5 looks great. There's a new Killer Instinct title. We've been waiting for a reboot for that game for a long time now. Had a bunch of racing games, and So November, $4.99. Or holiday season for the PlayStation 4, which we finally get to look at the hardware.
So November?
Probably
Early
November.
December.
No, I think it'll
December
be
24th.
It'll be before Black Friday.
I mean, 4th of July. There's a lot of holidays.
It's going to be before Thanksgiving for sure. $3.99 for the PlayStation 4, but big asterisk here, no camera with that. You do not get the PlayStation Eye for your $3.99. Sony basically came out and said that we don't think that motion gaming is something that everybody wants or is really good enough to build into every game. So therefore, we're not going to make that a standard part of the console, which makes it cheaper, which is nice. But it also means that developers will not be able to assume that people have that, which means it will probably get very minimal support, just like the PlayStation Move has not seen much support.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. I don't think everybody wants motion-based gaming.
I certainly don't.
Yeah.
Well, it also seems like the Kinect integration of the Xbox One is also designed to do for a lot of things besides gaming in terms of the interface and
watching you while you sleep, things like that.
So spying on you. So it's I can understand why Microsoft would want to have it integrated, and we'd heard about that this was going to be the case a long time ago, that in the next generation Xbox that it was going to be something that was integrated and sort of mandatory. Yeah. So I certainly understand that, because if they're trying to offer a consistent user experience across for everybody, and the best user experience requires a Kinect. I get that, and they've certainly made changes to how big a room needs to be to work properly with Kinect to accommodate that. So, but it is going to be it is reflected in the price. I mean, I think if you would adjust for inflation, a $500 console is not necessarily that expensive. Yeah. It's certainly not the most expensive console, adjusted for inflation that we've ever seen. But it is what
Neo Geo.
The Neo Geo. I think the Sega Saturn was adjusted for inflation. Slate had a really great.
The 3DO was pretty crazy too at the time. That was $600 like 8 or 9 years ago.
Yeah. Let's see if I can find it. The Slate article.
Yeah, I mean, I think Microsoft is right in that they realize that the Kinect is the future of not only the Xbox but of the company in general. I mean, this is a platform that they're incorporating, across the PC. I mean, they realize that this is, honestly, Kinect is the best thing that Microsoft has going for it right now. I'd say that across the board.
Sad but true. I mean, I don't think a lot of gamers really get excited about the Kinect. The 2600 was the most. Wow. Okay, so
the Atari 20 adjusted for for inflation, the Atari 2600.
Where does the 3DO fall
Is
on
the
that?
Neo
Is
Geo
it
even on
They
there?
don't have the 3D on there.
They don't have the 3DO? Come on.
Well, it's Slate. They've never heard of it.
The Neo Geo has to be on there somewhere, right?
But the Sega Saturn was $400 when it launched, and adjusted for $2013, that's $610. So
I think I bought mine for $75, like a year later, 2 years later, something like that. $699 for the 3DO when it launched. So let me see if I can. What year was that?
what was the cheapest
1993.
The
Wow.
Wii?
And I think I may have been wrong about the price of the PS3 earlier. I think it was $500 when it launched, but there was a $600 version. So I mean, it's definitely it's kind of not the cheapest, but it's definitely not the most expensive. But I can see for a lot of people, I mean, if you're a hardcore gamer feeling a little bit alienated by the Xbox One and feeling like the price differential is not in your favor. And feeling like maybe the PS4, especially if they've improved the online gaming experience, which was a big advantage the Xbox 360 had over the PS3. It was better at online gaming.
If we adjust
when
for
it launched.
inflation, the 3DO would cost $938.99, which I think is that. Yep. So that beats the 2600.
That would beat everything.
I can't imagine why the 3DO didn't sell so well.
So I mean, the price is going to drop in the next year, probably significantly. And I think the really hardcore gamers are probably going to buy both systems when it comes down to
that's
it.
possible. Yeah.
Guilty.
Yeah.
I have
You
pre-ordered.
already have, haven't you?
I pre-ordered both. I'm ashamed to admit, I've pre-ordered both multiple times at multiple retailers just to make sure. I will cancel whichever one is
Tim
most
needs an
likely.
Xbox for every room in his house.
That's not true. But I do need an Xbox in a bad way, and a PlayStation 4 as well. So I'll be
I
getting
didn't
both.
pre-order either, which I thought I was going to, and then I couldn't pull the
Wow.
trigger.
You're shaking your head, but your dogs aren't going to eat for the next year.
They're pretty cheap. It's
The weaker one-
It's
the
the
weaker
wife
one
that you
will
need to
become
worry
food.
about. The dogs will be fine. So I will be getting both, and I think, but that's a lot of money. It's $1,000 to get both consoles.
Yeah.
How much are we paying you?
I've had a long time to save up for this. I mean, it's been a long time since we had a new console come out. So.
That's true. You've had 8 years since the 360 to buy.
Yeah, typically there would have been another console refresh in
You need to
between.
buy the Neo Geo.
I still got to get a Neo Geo, man. I still got to get. That's like my my Eleanor, from Gone 60 Seconds. Neo Geo is my Eleanor. No,
That was an arcane reference.
Was it?
Not for Tim.
Not for a car guy. All right,
I was thinking
so
Rigby and darning her socks and I don't know.
darning
what kind of weird-
socks. No.
Oh, so I'm sorry. The Beatles. You don't know?
No.
Beatles.
So it's spelled with an A too. So just in case you want to look it up.
Sony did attack very directly to Microsoft on the DRM thing we were talking about earlier. They said, we can support you, do anything you want to, buy your disc, sell your disc,
Unless
give it to
you
your
live in
friends,
Japan.
whatever you want to. But then the next day we found out that they will allow DRM restrictions to be publisher based. So if a publisher wants to have the kind of
So
restrictions
if
that
Activision
Microsoft
wants to
has,
make games for the PlayStation,
if the next Raving Rabbids wants to have a 24-hour check-in, Sony will allow that to happen. Just like the PlayStation 4, I think will not be region locked, which is nice, but we've seen in the past. But then every publisher locks their games to a region anyway.
yeah, but so that's what you do,
what they
right? You
do.
put the heat on the publishers.
I suppose
Take
so.
it off yourself. That's the way to go.
I suppose so. Pass the
You
buck.
let
It's
Activision
the American
get the
way.
1 star on Amazon.
And then Nintendo also went to E3.
They were there. That
They-
is true.
they
That's a
showed
true
up.
fact. They showed off some games. They didn't even have a
Should
new...
we pour one out for Nintendo?
A little too early for that, but probably not far away.
I mean, it's a bad sign when the year that you launch your like last year, the year that you launch your console, everybody just is disappointed. It doesn't bode well for the next 5.
No, it doesn't.
It's bad. But have they even sold 1 million of the Wii U yet? I mean, that install
think
base has got to be
so.
so tiny.
I mean, they showed off a new Zelda. Problem is, it's actually an HD remake of an existing Zelda. They showed off a new Mario Kart coming next year.
Smash Brothers.
Smash Brothers.
Let's be honest.
also
I mean,
coming
everything at
next
this point
year.
is a HD remake of something they did before.
That's
It's
true, but they could at least add some new levels or something like that. I mean, there's a new Donkey
Mega
Kong
Man.
game.
Mega
Mega Man,
Man's
that's true.
that's
That looks
cool.
cool.
Yeah.
There's a new Super Mario game, but it's not an actual proper like Mario Galaxy game. It's a new Super Mario Brothers style game in 3D, but still with multiplayer. They really need to show a killer new Mario game, killer new Zelda game, and then the new Smash
console.
Brothers. Well, I don't know about that. And they did show some of those things, but they're not coming till next year, which just boggles my mind.
They need to show a redesign of the console. They need to show like a new tablet, maybe the ability to use it with your own tablet, and
that wouldn't have been a bad thing.
Make up a little ground.
I mean, Nintendo's always been about the games, and they just didn't have. They had some good looking games, but again, they're not coming out this holiday season, so they're just going to get decimated.
But if Nintendo's always been about the games, it seems like it would be easiest for them to make the leap to allowing those
absolutely.
games
In
on
fact,
other devices.
Back in the day, they used to say, we only make consoles because we feel like we need to. We just want to make games. We only make the hardware because we feel like we need to. It seems like they will probably. They're probably not far away from taking the Sega route and starting making games for other platforms. The question is, will it be for a single platform? Like, will they get purchased by Apple and just make iOS games?
I kind of feel like the current management will go down with the ship before they do that. Like, it's such a cultural.
But then those properties will be on the block for. I think, but honestly, I think
we could pull our assets and buy up one character.
Kirby probably.
We might, Kirby
Bowser.
or Kid Icarus. Bowser's just fine actually. Then I can have the rights for my dog's name. Actually, that'd be great. Probably legally safer that way.
I don't think that these necessarily need to be mutually exclusive things. I think they can license their games for these devices, and if they make good enough hardware, they can continue to sell hardware. I mean, What I see being best case scenario for Nintendo is A, obviously going over to these mobile devices, and B, staying in mobile hardware. I mean, staying in portable consoles. I think they do that. They still manage to do that fairly well.
But even the 3DS is. I mean, it's doing better, but it's not doing great.
I think if they could channel all their resources into a portable console, they could easily have the best portable console. They arguably do, but they could have a better one.
I don't think they do. It's sad. Very sad. There was lots of other stuff at E3 as ever. A lot of things going on with the Oculus Rift. Probably one of the most exciting things there's the new HD version of the Oculus Rift, which is you can get an even bigger screen. And then we tried EVR, which is like a kind of like a demo-y sort of game at this point with Spaceship, which makes sense. So you're
heads-up display
doing dogfighting in outer space.
Yeah.
Sounds pretty awesome.
Yeah, it looks really good, that one.
Pretty awesome. But again, it's just kind of a demo prototype thing, not necessarily leading to a full retail release yet, but potentially.
Anytime you guys feel like it.
And then there's the VirtuX Omni VR treadmill, which I think is on Kickstarter now, right?
Yeah, it has been for a while. They surpassed their goal.
Oh, they did. Okay.
Yeah.
So you got to run around on that for a bit?
Yeah, it was weird. It was a weird experience.
So describe
So
that
I went
weird
into
experience.
some of these. So I had a busy week this week. I managed to be at both of these events, and on what's today? Today's Friday. So
it is Friday. Wednesday? Thursday?
Tuesday night. Tuesday night, I went to somebody's hotel room and got to run around on a treadmill with an Oculus Rift on.
Not a treadmill.
Well,
that sounds disgusting.
It was a stationary treadmill. I don't know if I've been calling it kind of a treadmill because I don't know.
Omnidirectional.
Yeah, it's here's
Omni-mill?
Yeah, it's a big piece of plastic. It's a concave piece of plastic that your feet slip on.
Yeah,
I know it doesn't sound super exciting.
So on the Kickstarter, they show special shoes. Did you have to wear special shoes, or can you? Just
I wore loafers with injection molded pieces of plastic that were essentially adhered to the bottom of them.
So you do need a special set of footwear.
And it's loud. Did you watch the video? It's really loud.
I didn't watch the video. No.
But here's what I'll say: if you want to try this, and you should, it's a really cool experience. I played a first-person shooter, and it was neat. Get used to the Oculus Rift before you do this, because you don't want your first experience with the Oculus Rift. This was my first experience with the Oculus Rift.
To be vomiting all over the.
You don't want to be running around, because you will get nauseous the first time you use the Oculus Rift. You just will, and if you're running around while you're using it.
Bad combo.
It's a bad combination. But yeah, no, it's an interesting. It's definitely an interesting approach to a very unique problem, which is if you want a fully immersive experience, you can't really have that while you're sitting down, and this is a way to do that without. I mean, it's expensive. Don't get me wrong. This is an expensive thing. It's probably going to be around $500, but creating an actual treadmill would be far, far more expensive.
Yeah, a good treadmill in the gym, you're looking at $1,200 to $1,200.
Yeah, and we're talking about an omnidirectional treadmill.
Yeah,
great. I mean, for Skyrim, it's like you have to walk for like 3 hours to get to places.
Yeah, well, hey, it'd be a great workout, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
no,
you
I
can't
think
say anything about gamers.
Yeah, I was, I felt bad. I got a little bit of sweat on the dude's Oculus.
I think they're used to that at this
hotel
point.
room.
Chances are you got somebody else's sweat on your forehead too as you were doing.
I definitely caught something in that hotel room.
Yeah.
Great. Great. But that's, it's so crazy to me that we're seeing all this stuff again because that's the sort of thing that people were working on 15 years ago. VR headsets and crazy omnidirectional treadmills.
You worked at a place that had those, right?
Yeah, minus the treadmill. But yeah, I used to set up people on the VR machines back in like 1996. And people were working on omnidirectional treadmills and all sorts of immersive VR stuff. And then it's like people forgot about it for 15 years.
Wait, when's the Lawnmower Man reboot?
It's probably due for
I was
a
saying
reboot.
it's totally ready.
Yeah.
Johnny Mnemonic.
They've rebooted Superman in 3 or 4 times since then. So, it's probably time for a Lawnmower Man reboot.
This is here's the and it's good that you draw that comparison because the thing about this is like ultimately who is going to have this because we're talking from a price perspective. You need to buy an Oculus, which I don't know that we have a price on that yet.
I think the Kickstarters were $600 if I remember correctly.
So that's the low end of what that's
for
cost.
the dev unit.
For the dev units, yeah.
So you need that. You need console, obviously a game, a Kinect.
A gaming PC, right?
Eventually they'll have console support though.
Yeah, and a Kinect. For it to actually track your motion, and then this $500 thing. And then there's spatial issues. This is not a small thing.
Yeah, and it doesn't collapse down and stick under your couch or anything like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to come. I talked to him, and it's going to come in 2 pieces, obviously, because they have to ship it. So
2 very large pieces.
Yeah, 2 very large pieces, and it's such a small segment of the population who, are so invested that they want this thing, and B, aren't in good enough shape to actually use it.
And that's the thing. It's not going to make anybody better at the games they play either. I mean, if you're playing like Counter-Strike Online or Battlefield or anything like that, you're probably going to be much slower than the dude who's sitting back on the couch eating Doritos.
It's a really
with his
good
controller in his
exercise,
hand.
though. It is. It's honestly, you're literally like running around. I mean, so that's one thing.
I mean, I think it might be, something that we see first in, like where people, I'm trying to remember the name. What people, where you go, people used to go.
Internet cafes,
yeah,
Dave
like that kind of like gaming cafes, like that kind of experience. I certainly, I think we're going to see a big usage for people suffering from PTSD and things like that, where they're able to. I mean, they already started using that.
Although you don't want them to play first-person shooters.
No. But I'm saying that like using the technology to create immersive environments where people can deal with those sorts of things.
They're already using VR.
Yeah, so I think you could see that. I mean, eventually the prices. I mean, it's hard. There's no Moore's law for treadmills, so it's not like that they're going to be able to get the price down that much. But I do think that there'll be like a gaming cafe type experience where they'll be very popular and people like to use them. And then it's just going to be obviously there's a market for hardcore PC gamers, and a lot of those people are comfortable spending a lot of money to have a really amazing experience. And so I think that'll be sort of the target market.
I mean, here's what I'll say. I mean, it is a relatively elegant solution, but I think it's still a very clunky solution. And I think within the next year or 2, we're probably going to have a much better way to take care of that problem. And really, as these if this thing proves any kind of success at all, there's going to be plans for you to make your own. There's going to be much cheaper ones. I mean, again, we're
3D print one.
In several pieces, possibly, but we're talking about a piece of plastic that you're running in, and there's a bit of a support system too. Apparently, I was too tall for this one. The guy who showed it to me was fairly short, but it goes around your waist, and you have to wear this harness so that you can move around 360 degrees with a gun. I was holding it with one hand and holding the other. I'm not a super tall person, so. That's a problem. But again, this was all prototype stuff.
Yeah, it's pretty exciting stuff. We also saw the new Ouya, which is a lot like the old Ouya. The change being, 1, there are no names written on the side, unlike the Founder Edition. 2, the holes around the buttons on the controller are a little bit bigger now, so they won't get stuck underneath, which is a major improvement. Yeah. And that's it. Pretty much everything else is exactly the same. I was a little bit bummed that they didn't announce anything like shipping out new controller faceplates to those backers on
Well, they weren't invited, right? Do you know this story?
No, I thought they just didn't want to pay for it.
Yeah.
I mean, they weren't welcome, I guess is the way to put it.
So they set up a booth across the street, which is something that I forgot who used to do that. They used to have big crazy parties in the parking lot across from the LACC. So anyway, they set up across the street, and then they were basically inviting people to come out and do appointments there. And then basically they got called by the police. The police showed up, and
my understanding is that they parked a giant truck in front of them to block people, block the line of sight.
It was but ultimately they didn't have the money, or they didn't want to buy floor space at E3, which I can understand. I mean, it's not exactly a cheap show, so they try to get in for free by doing it across the street. So, I mean, I think that there's whatever. Blame on both sides. We'll put it that way.
Yeah, obviously they've already done their big launch, and they're not going to have anything hugely new from a hardware perspective before next year. I mean, they could show off some games, but it wasn't really a show for them ultimately.
Yeah, and there was a new UI which they did just push out not too long ago to consoles if you already have one, which is faster performance, which is nice, and some other nice little tweaks. You can turn the console off with the controller now, which is good too, and turn it on again. So some nice tweaks released for the Ouya, but no major changes. And again, no new faceplates for people who've already bought them, like myself. Bit of a bummer. A couple of Android consoles were announced beyond the Ouya, the Mojo from Mad Catz and the Unu as well. People are running out of names. It's pretty obvious.
Calling it the Ono when we were getting a demo of it.
The Mojo Uno. You played with the Mojo?
I played with both of those.
Were you impressed with either of these two devices? Describe them for us.
The Mojo is still... It's way too early to tell at this point. I mean, they're
from peripheral maker Mad Catz.
From Mad Catz, yeah. They're promising. Mad Catz actually had a few kind of cool things on the show floor, but they're not talking specs yet. The only thing they're saying is that when it comes out, it's going to have the best specs of anything in that space. So it's got that going.
It's going to be awesome. That's a lock.
And I played a demo unit, and it was what's the water ski game? The big Android water ski game. Like, you know what I'm talking about?
Nope.
No.
He's Googling it. It's a very popular. It's in the story actually. It should be. So I played that and it seemed Riptide.
I thought it was a boat racing game.
No, it's jet skis.
Oh, jet skis. Oh, that's not the water skis.
I'm sorry.
It's not water skis.
I apologize. I have not had a lot of sleep this week.
I've not been to the ocean.
So you're on a jet ski. You're playing this console.
So I was playing the console on a jet ski in the middle of the ocean.
Mm-hmm.
Take that, Peter.
Oh, wow.
First time at the ocean.
First time seeing water.
Yep. Despite being from California and living in New York. You
just choose not to look.
Yeah, exactly. I suppose my question is, like, people who like live in the Midwest, like, how do they know what direction it is when there's not a big ocean there? Gives me place.
They get in their giant SUV and they look at the compass on the mirror, and that's how they know. So we haven't talked about the Mojo at all, except it's going to be awesome.
Yeah, no, it's open. It's way more open than Ouya. I think that's the main thing that it has going for it. And they've promised to provide all the proper SDKs and everything.
So no proprietary game store.
It uses
Android?
Amazon, uses Google, uses anything you want. It's totally open. You can do word processing if that's something that you want to do on your TV. No. Obviously we'll see how well any of these games ultimately end up working for it, and that depends on if it's popular and if people actually want to develop for it.
And they showed a controller that was
the controller's pretty
innovatively named Control, CTRL. That is
the control.
It's got like a decal, some cat scratches on the side, which means it's probably really badass.
Yeah, Ted Nugent signed it, and
it's got the 3 buttons all have O's on them, which might be a little bit confusing. Especially if you're colorblind, because there's a green button and a yellow button, which I'm actually having a hard time differentiating myself here.
It's a cool. It's pretty cool though. It's got a switch on it, so you can turn it into a mouse, and they've got a keyboard and everything. Yeah,
so it's like a transformer controller.
If it's cheap enough.
But very early days for this. No price yet, right?
No price yet.
So you got a little ways to wait on that one.
There is a price on the
Unu. How much?
Which is $200, I think.
Okay.
Well, okay, so it's $200. It's $249.
Yep.
There's a base unit that comes with the little remote control / keyboard, and then it comes with a docking station, and then there's for $249 is the gaming one, which comes with the controller, which is a pretty nice controller actually. And again, it's still a prototype. It's going to get better. The big difference here between this and the Mad Catz and the Ouya and all those other things is that it's a tablet. It's basically a tablet with an HDMI port that you could plug into your TV.
So more like the Razer Edge sort of thing than okay.
But it's a not super, but it's a pretty cheap tablet. And
$200 for a tablet is not
they
bad.
created a nice little interface for it that makes it easier to use on the TV. It did not work well at all. They were blaming that. The guys were getting really frustrated with it.
Yeah.
I was getting frustrated along with them. They blamed that on the fact that they called it an alpha unit and just that there were a lot of waves in the air. So it's hard to control it. And
damn those waves.
We didn't think anyone would want to try it.
Yeah, exactly. They were getting legitimately frustrated.
Didn't occur to us.
No. But the interesting thing, and the reason why I put those two on there was because this is really it was a show about Microsoft and Sony. I mean, E3, and so there weren't a lot of smaller things. You know,
Yeah.
we were, I because I was in San Francisco on Monday, obviously, so I was there Tuesday, Wednesday, and by noon on Wednesday, I had basically run out of things to write about. We had seen everything.
Yeah.
Not a super exciting show for smaller companies, but it is kind of interesting to see everybody try to rush into that Ouya space. Didn't see anything from GameStick as far as I can tell.
Yeah, that just seems like that's going to be a bloody mess at the end of this year with all sorts of Android consoles that have lost.
I mean, it's going to be like the
dollars.
phone market where it's like
Yeah.
the barrier to entry is really low. And
How cheap can you make this thing and still make money on it? Especially when you're not. I mean, Ouya at least is going to be making money off of games, right? If they've got their own proprietary store.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I mean, if all these manufacturers are going to be launching their own proprietary game stores on top of their own hardware, then ultimately it's just going to be a huge mess.
It's gonna be a mess.
And that's going to be really ugly. So otherwise they have to make a profit on the hardware, which for these prices doesn't seem like they're going to make
But
much.
think about how many random HDMI Android sticks there are for TV
Sure.
now. I mean, it's like there's a new one.
How many Chinese companies are going to
Yeah,
have
they
this
just
by
pump.
the
They're just
holidays?
pumping them
Yeah.
out because I mean the chipsets are cheap and it's you don't have to buy a display.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I could see potentially happening is obviously Ouya pretty much controls the space right now. If another really big company came in and could somehow leverage software offerings or whatever base they have,
Nintendo,
for example,
That's the future of Nintendo. Why didn't we think
Absolutely.
that before?
NintenDroid.
they could still say they're making hardware. They could have their own dumb little gamepad, and everybody's happy.
This is like the podcast of like me offering like awful stupid ideas.
I don't know if it's. If you look at where they are right now, I don't know. If they came out with that thing right now.
Nintendo Windows Phone.
Listen. I just stopped you right there. If they came out right now, okay, at E3 they said, okay, we're coming out with a $50 console. You could play all of those old Nintendo games on it, $50. We've got our own game store. We'll make a little money off of it.
Mm-hmm.
I think people would get excited about that.
Sure, I think they would too. If it was just a retro console, just all like an official way to play all your old
Everything
NES
up
games and everything
through
else.
what, GameCube maybe?
You might even draw the line a little before
64.
that. The 64, yeah, that'd be good.
I feel like you could probably get.
But isn't that
Some
the point
pretty
of the cheaper Wii?
Partly, yeah, it is the Red Wii.
Yeah.
We've also got one final
Is the
thing.
Red Wii basically a big Ouya at this point?
The ACLU has sued the NSA over with the Prism controversy, which has been controversial this week. Chances are you've read some things
Controversial
about the Prism program
Yeah,
in the past week. I almost did say, please. You've probably read some things about the PS4 as well. So the NSA has been sued by the ACLU, saying that it's not constitutional for them to be basically doing what they're doing, which is effectively having the ability to look at anything they want to without telling anybody that they're looking at it.
Yeah, I put this. I tentatively put this on the list because especially after talking about all these things, and being pretty crunched for time. I don't know if this is something we want to go into too much, but the one thing I would say is anybody really surprised about this?
No, not in the least.
I don't think so.
I just assumed that the government was.
Yeah.
I mean, not that.
Since the Patriot Act came out, at the very least.
Yeah.
Well, I assumed that at least that that they had the ability to access these things. Maybe that they weren't. The idea that they were just dumping everything and then getting a warrant to look at the things that they wanted to look at. That part is that mechanism is a little murkier, especially because the FISA court basically disapproves everything. So it's not really. Yeah. It's not really a watchdog, and if the warrant process is just doesn't really offer any sort of meaningful oversight, then it's not really. Then the NSA really does have like full carte blanche to do whatever it wants, and I think that we should have an open conversation about what kind of limits we want to have there. Mm-hmm. I mean, the idea that the government, the idea that they're so worried that people know about this, it seems weird to me because it's like we already know that the government can wiretap our phones if it gets a warrant. So the idea that like if you're a terrorist, the idea that maybe your Gmail account could possibly be monitored. I mean, like you have to be a pretty stupid person to not think about that.
Yeah, and certainly if they really do suspect people, they're going to be able to get those rights probably for most of these organizations anyway.
Yeah, and so I think that I think that the argument is, I think to me the debate is really not should the government have the ability to access communications if it has a good reason to do so. I think we could all agree that if they have just like
warrants exist.
Yeah, if they have a warrant, exactly.
Yeah.
If you have a warrant, you have probable cause, you have a reason to search someone's home. Obviously you can do that, and your email should not be really should not be like more sacrosanct than your home, right? But I think what I think concerns me and it concerns a lot of people is the idea that the government either has too easy access to all that information or is kind of sucking up all that data and holding onto it. And then accessing it when it feels like it needs to via a warrant.
Yeah, and could potentially be using it for non-life-threatening instances. I mean,
and also the thing is, like, once you build the infrastructure to do this, it becomes a slippery slope where the threshold for looking at someone's private communications, that threshold that drops and drops and drops over time. Sure. And I think that
seems already pretty low.
It's pretty low, and I think that I think we as a society have to have like a really honest conversation about what the balance should be.
And I think that's all that I would like to see anyway.
Well,
I think that the program doesn't need to go away. We just need to know more about it.
And I don't want to make it sound like I was saying what I was saying, but I need to discount outrage, because I think outrage is probably a good, important thing to have during this. I mean, people should be outraged at these things. I mean, these are important conversations to be having, but. Yeah, it's
not shocking.
Yeah, exactly,
Right.
and they are making themselves worse by making it such a secret thing, knowing that eventually it's going to come out, and when it does,
yeah, I would have taken the opposite approach, been like, "Well, you guys didn't already know this?
Yeah, like, we're watching you."
Yeah, like of
Big
course,
brother,
like,
we're getting into Orwellian territory here.
yeah.
They should have launched it as a service. I think. I mean, that could have been a hugely great start. They could be making so much money right now. I mean, the government's struggling for tax revenue right now, right?
Like an Android based.
Yeah.
Well, I love how they're like
Absolutely.
the program only cost $20 million. I'm like, man, that's like
Yeah.
Yeah, it's because everything was already in
like
place.
1/50th Instagram, right?
Yeah, crazy. All right, so let's do some questions. We got one from Adam Tucker 1988 on Twitter, he actually asked me yesterday about the MacBook Air battery life, whether or not this is running Mavericks. It's not running Mavericks, so that 1251 was just on good old Mountain Lion. So he's asking, what do we think we're expecting when we do run Mavericks on here? And that I don't know. Apple didn't give us any firm figures of any percentage, which is actually kind of surprising.
They did say there'd be a bump, though.
There'll be
I
an
just don't
improvement,
think it's there yet.
I would think maybe 45 minutes to an hour. I don't know. I mean,
That's significant.
just guessing.
Yeah.
I really don't know.
I think maybe they were worried about offering something that would cause people maybe to wait to purchase.
True. Could be.
Even if it was said, your current, and also they didn't want to overpromise for any current machines, because I mean my MacBook Air is a couple of years old, and if I have like some reasonable expectation that maybe the battery life might get a little bit better, and it doesn't, that might be frustrating.
Do you think that people would wait to buy a new system that they can upgrade to the software on already? I mean, would people really wait for new hardware?
I think that I think that Apple didn't want to muddy the waters a little bit and create like a sense of like they didn't want to make specific promises for current hardware that will get upgraded, because that's a harder situation to control. But then they also didn't want to create a situation where they say, hey, once we have Mavericks out on new hardware, you're going to see these real benefits, because then people would definitely wait. I mean, if you felt like, I buy a MacBook Pro right now that doesn't have Mavericks on it, and then the one that gets introduced in the fall is optimized for Mavericks, has significantly better battery life, which it's gonna anyway because of Haswell, but even more of a differential. I think that would frustrate some people. I
think even more than that, though. Obviously, this isn't the last keynote we're going to see from Apple where Mavericks is taking center stage. So I think they're holding some. They're obviously holding some stuff for a future announcement.
Sure.
So I think numbers could be one of those things.
Grublin on Twitter asking, has this year's WWDC fulfilled your expectations? Not quite for me, because I was really hoping on a 13-inch Pro, so I was a little bit disappointed in that regard. But I think, in terms of iOS and OS 10, I think those things look good. So more or less, right?
I think it was, I think it was pretty much everything I expected. I wasn't expecting anything radical in the hardware department, but I am I think iOS 7 looks great, and I'm really excited to use it, but I'm still pretty disappointed with OS 10 at this point.
Peter?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of it did everything about what we expected. I did think there was a reasonable expectation that there'd be a new 13-inch MacBook Pro. Didn't happen, but we know it'll come soon enough. So I wasn't too concerned. And I thought, like Brian, I think iOS 7 looks pretty good. I'm looking forward to trying it. I don't use an iPhone, but I use an iPad. And so I'm looking forward to seeing especially what differences there might be specific to the iPad OS. Yeah, I know. And I'm glad that I don't necessarily have to upgrade my iPad to take advantage of that.
Yeah, that's definitely good.
I'm not necessarily interested in buying another one at this point. And then with OS 10, I'm actually not disappointed because I don't expect very much out of it. I do think that it looks like maybe they'll finally get mission control right, which has been they just keep screwing it up.
That's a good point actually, and I'm sure you were happy about this, that they didn't make a big deal about all the mobile like features that are coming to it. So they're not going that much.
That was one thing that we were afraid of, that the new OS 10 would be much more iOS-like than before. But ultimately, it isn't. The last version added more iOS features than this one did for sure. So that was a trend that didn't continue. But I'm guessing the next time we see an OS 10 refresh, we will. Victor Wu in chat asking, where is my Google Glass? Sitting at home on my desk. I actually haven't worn them in a while, now that I think about it.
You want free Google Glass?
No. I think the name is Nana Hene. I'm not sure. From Ghana. Welcome. Perhaps winner of the furthest away. Probably fairly late in the evening, asking, why does the Xbox One need to connect to the internet every 24 hours? So the idea is basically when you get a game, the disc has some sort of a unique ID on it. So when you install that game, it associates that ID to your profile. So at that point, you can take the disc and throw it away, really, if you want to. You can also go to your friend's Xbox One, sign in on his console, and download the game and play it there, which is actually kind of cool. But the thing is then, what if you take that disc and you give it to your friend and they install it on their system? What it'll do is it'll check that ID, and it'll say, oh, Tim is still playing that game, therefore this other person can't use it. So it'll every 24 hours check to make sure that you still own that game. And effectively, when you do go to sell that game or give it to your friend, you will have to then somehow tell Microsoft, this disc with this ID on it is no longer owned by me, it's now owned by somebody else. At that point, after 24 hours, presumably, Microsoft will remotely deactivate that game on your system. Right. So it's how they're handling the ability to give away or to sell games.
And they've done content that self-destructs before. I mean, with Place for Sure, it had I think it had a 30-day check-in.
And the original Xbox self-destructed too after about 12 months.
Most games have exploded.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
they have.
Oh, I still love mine.
Boy, scrolling through questions. Okay. I guess. Well, should I get a PlayStation 4? And a follow-up question. If you do not have regular internet access, yes. Indeed, you may not in Ghana. Perhaps I'm going to get both.
He's online right now.
You're online, so as long as you can get online every day, you'll probably be okay. It's entirely possible.
For these parts of New York.
All right, we have run out of time and then some. So I want to thank everybody for joining us live in this special Friday noon edition podcast. Hope you enjoyed your lunch, because I didn't get lunch today. Yes, if you're listening to us on tape, I hope you're still eating your lunch.
Pick up a salad.
That'd be great if you give me a salad. That'd be fantastic. Thanks, Brian. Do you want a salad, Peter?
I'm not sure if time.
Joe, you want a salad? Okay.
So
We'll figure out the salad thing after the podcast. Thanks again,
horses.
everybody. We'll be back next week with another episode of the Engadget podcast. Have great weekends.
Thanks.